It had been building for over an hour. November 14th, 2025. Just past midnight local time. On the surface, everything looked normal in the Novorossiysk Gulf. The Black Sea was calm, the wind light, the shoreline quiet. Russian soldiers on guard duty along the coast moved through their routines with practiced boredom. Another long night shift. Another port to protect. For them, this was supposed to be the safest assignment in the country. Novorossiysk was not an ordinary seaport. It was Russia's largest port, larger than St. Petersburg, larger than Murmansk, a critical artery for oil, fuel, military logistics, and maritime trade. After Moscow, there was no place in Russia more heavily guarded. The city sat beneath a layered air defense umbrella that Russian generals believed to be untouchable. Pantsir systems guarded the low altitudes. Tor systems filled the gaps. And towering above everything, 12 S-400 launchers formed what was described in briefings as an invisible dome. On the maps inside the general staff, Novorossiysk was outlined in thick red. A no-go zone. A box no enemy weapon could realistically penetrate. But that confidence rested on one assumption, that physics, distance, and technology would always work in Russia's favor. That night, those assumptions would collapse. Far away, deep inside Ukraine's Odessa region, a single camouflage-painted truck sat motionless among pine trees. Its engine was off, its lights dark. From the air, it was invisible. From the road, it looked like nothing more than another abandoned vehicle swallowed by the forest. Inside the cab, a non-commissioned officer sat rigidly in the driver's seat. His hand hovered over a red safety cover beneath the control panel. He paused, not out of hesitation, but out of awareness. Everyone in that truck understood the stakes. If this failed, it would be remembered as a reckless gamble. If it succeeded, it would erase a myth that had protected Russia for years. Behind the truck, 4 long capsules began to rise, lifting vertically with a mechanical hum. They were massive tubes, nearly the length of the vehicle itself, locking into position and pointing toward the night sky. Inside each one rested a weapon the Kremlin had quietly learned to fear. The long-range land attack variant of the Neptune cruise missile. This version was different. Heavier, reinforced, armed with hundreds of kilograms of explosive. Designed not for ships, but for hardened ground targets. With a reach approaching 1,000 kilometers, the engineer standing beside the launcher stared at the final line of data on his laptop. Wind conditions, temperature, sea state, navigation corridors, intermediate waypoints, the sea skimming profile over the Black Sea. Everything was green. In one corner of the screen, the target package flashed. The first 2 missiles were assigned to the S-400 clusters, belonging to the Kuban anti-aircraft regiment, positioned on the hills east of Novorossiysk. The last 2 were programmed for the pumping stations and tank farm at the Shishariz terminal, the logistical heart of the port. The silence around the truck felt heavy, almost oppressive. This was not fear, it was understanding. If the launch succeeded, it would not just destroy hardware, it would shatter the belief that Novorossiysk was untouchable. The commander's voice cut through the stillness. Short, clear, final, ready. The countdown began. 10, 5, 3. The night cracked open with a deep, rolling rumble. The lid of the first capsule blew away as a shadow erupted upward. The booster ignited instantly, throwing sparks and flame into the darkness as the missile surged straight up. Seconds later, it pitched forward, nose turning toward the Black Sea, and began to descend. Then the second missile, then the third, then the fourth. 4 long Neptunes accelerated away, gliding at subsonic speed, roughly 900 kilometers per hour. Within moments, they dropped low, settling just meters above the sea surface. To anyone watching from a distance, it would have looked like nothing at all. Just darkness swallowing faint shapes. Hundreds of kilometers away, the fate of a port, an air defense battalion, and an entire strategic narrative was already sealed. On the hills east of Novorossiysk, Inside the command shelter of the Kuban anti-aircraft regiment, the radar operator leaned forward as his screen suddenly changed. Until seconds earlier, it had been calm. Civilian air traffic, routine tracks, nothing unusual over the Black Sea. Then the display flooded with red. Dozens of small targets appeared at once. Then hundreds. Different altitudes, different bearings, all converging toward the coast. The alarm sounded. Someone spoke aloud, almost dismissively. "Oh, drone. Drone is here." What the operator did not yet understand was that this flood of targets was deliberate. FP-1 and FP-2 kamikaze UAVs were diving directly into the heart of the S-400 radar lobes, intentionally presenting weak, confusing echoes. Some climbed, some dropped, some changed speed abruptly. Tracks jumped, returns overlapped. On the screen, it looked like chaos. What the operators could not see was what mattered most. At that very moment, 4 long Neptune missiles were skimming the Black Sea, flying so low that they were literally hidden by the curvature of the Earth itself. The S-400's theoretical 400-kilometer range meant nothing here. No radar, no matter how powerful, could see below the horizon. Ukraine had turned physics into a weapon. After launch, the Neptunes had climbed briefly to lock their course using inertial and satellite navigation. Then, as they approached the sea, they dropped hard, reducing radar cross-section and sliding into a corridor the S-400 simply could not watch. Inside the shelter, Russian operators followed their training. They locked onto the densest, most visible clusters. Pantsir batteries opened fire, tracers tearing through the night. Tor systems joined in. Then the expensive interceptors launched. S-300 seconds, S-400 seconds. White streaks arced upward, detonating among the drones. From the port below, sailors filmed the sky lighting up. Explosions bloomed overhead like a fireworks display. In the background of the footage, someone could be heard saying, almost admiringly, "Very nice." It was not victory they were witnessing. It was the air defense system consuming itself. Operators celebrated rising kill counts on their consoles. Dozens of drones destroyed. Scores more disrupted. The narrative inside the bunker was simple. The system was working. The real threat remained invisible. Just beyond the bottom edge of the radar envelope, 4 long Neptunes slipped through the dead band, riding the wave crests. The sea-skimming profile weakened even the most powerful radars, and with every second, the missiles closed the distance. As they crossed the coastline, the first 2 Neptunes climbed slightly. Their imaging infrared seekers activated. The hills ahead came alive in thermal contrast. A massive 96 N6 radar antenna glowed as a bright orange circle as it rotated. Nearby, the rectangular face of a 92 N6 engagement radar burned clearly against the cold ground. On a slope below, 4 S-400 launchers sat side by side, their cylindrical tubes warm with internal electronics. Inside the missile's guidance system, software compared the image to stored templates. Radar. Engagement system. Launchers. 1 integrated target. The first Neptune made a subtle correction. It stayed low, then rose sharply in the final seconds and plunged directly into the center of the cluster. For a fraction of a second, the hillside froze. Then, the explosion tore it open. A massive fireball erupted, lighting the sky above Novorossiysk. The warhead detonated beside the launchers and radar equipment. The spinning head of the 96 N6 antenna was ripped free and thrown into the air. Shrapnel scythed through surrounding systems. Almost immediately, S-400 missiles still inside their tubes began to cook off. 1 explosion became 2, then 3, then 4. Columns of fire shot upward as the launchers detonated in sequence. Cameras along the port captured a blinding flash, followed by a swelling fireball that rolled across the hills. Seconds later, the second Neptune struck the neighboring cluster near the 92 N6 engagement radar. Telemetry later showed only meters of deviation. The result was identical. Impact, detonation, generators exploding, missiles igniting uncontrollably, streaking into the sky like deadly fireworks. By the time the echoes faded, The Kuban regiment's shield was gone. Satellite images released later would confirm the damage. At least 4 S-400 launchers destroyed. The 96N6 early warning radar eliminated. The 92N6 engagement radar wiped out. The remaining launchers stood intact, but blind, deaf, and useless. While Russian operators were still trying to understand what had happened, the other 2 Neptunes were already inbound from the sea. There was no longer any serious threat to them. Pantsir crews were still firing at drones. Short-range systems were overwhelmed, tracking false targets, losing discipline. The sky defenses were burning. The 3rd Neptune approached Novorossiysk itself, still hugging the surface. This time, the infrared seeker scanned the coast. The Cheshires oil terminal lit up like a map of heat. Massive circular tanks glowed intensely. The pumping stations beside them burned brighter still, dense and angular. The missile selected the pumping station. In the final second, it rose slightly, then dove, almost vertically. The impact was instant and catastrophic. A white flash erupted at the heart of the terminal. The warhead detonated above the main manifold, and the shockwave tore through pumps, control rooms, and power distribution in a single blow. Flames raced through pipelines like fire through veins. The 4th Neptune followed seconds behind. Its target was the tank farm. It locked onto a full tank, its heat signature unmistakable. The dive, the explosion, the fireball. A towering column of flame rose into the night sky. Turkish sailors in the port later described the scene as hellish. In the background of their footage, a stunned voice whispered, "Very beautiful." It was not admiration. It was disbelief. 4 Ukrainian missiles, launched from over 600 kilometers away, had brought one of Russia's most critical ports to its knees. 2 had erased an S-400 battalion in a cascading chain reaction. 2 had crippled the pumping stations and tank farm that fed the port's lifeblood. With the air defenses destroyed, Novorossiysk was suddenly naked. A new wave of drones poured in from multiple directions. Some assessed damage at the pumping station. Others hunted for intact facilities. More headed toward container yards and internal infrastructure. Explosions multiplied across the bay. A UAV struck the energy control center. The terminal attempted an emergency shutdown, but the systems responsible for issuing the command were already destroyed. The fires grew deeper, not just wider. In the tank yard, additional explosions rocked the damaged tank, which burned like a wounded giant. In the container yard, shockwaves shattered equipment. A civilian vessel was damaged by falling debris. 3 crew members were injured. When the images hit social media, the illusion shattered. This was not a frontline strike. This was the heart of Russia's domestic rear. The Ministry of Defense responded reflexively. 66 Ukrainian UAVs shot down in the Krasnodar region. Perhaps many were. It did not matter. The main strike had landed. Governor Veniamin Kondratiev could no longer dismiss the situation with reassurances. The panic was undeniable. A state of emergency was officially declared. Independent sources confirmed the port was completely closed. That night, Novorossiysk stopped being untouchable.